Okay, so you've been looking into how to really get the most out of your big data processing, specifically when you're working with Apache Spark in Microsoft Fabric.
Right. Trying to fine-tune that balance between costs and getting the performance you need.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like all these different pieces, they're trying to figure out how to put the puzzle together.
Absolutely.
And, well, today we're going to dive deep into that and really make those pieces fit.
That sounds like a plan.
So specifically today, we're going deep on Autoscale Billing for Spark in Microsoft Fabric.
All right.
And you've actually sent over some really great resources to get us started.
Right.
We've got a LinkedIn post from Just Blindbeck, which kind of kicked off the whole conversation.
It did, yeah.
And then there are a couple of Microsoft Learn articles.
Right.
One that gives us a really solid overview of Autoscale Billing, and then another one that gets into the nitty-gritty of actually configuring it step by step. And of course, we can't forget the Microsoft Fabric blog post, where this feature was first announced with all the excitement.
Yeah.
And then to round it all out, we have a Microsoft Learn document that dives into the metrics app.
Okay.
And specifically that Autoscale compute page.
Right.
So we've got a lot to work with here.
We do.
And our mission for this deep dive is pretty simple.
Okay.
We want to pull out the most valuable, the most important information from all of this stuff. So you come away knowing exactly what Autoscale Billing is,
Right.
how it really works under the hood, why you might want to use it, and of course, how to get started.
Perfect.
So let's just jump right in with the basics.
Okay.
What is Autoscale Billing for Spark, in plain English?
So Autoscale Billing for Spark, it's basically a new way to pay for your Apache Spark workloads in Microsoft Fabric.
Okay.
So as Just Blindbeck was talking about on LinkedIn and, the Microsoft Learn docs back this up,
Right.
it's a serverless pay-as-you-go model. So when you're running those Spark jobs, they're not using up the capacity units or the CUs from your regular Fabric capacity.
Ah, okay. So they're not pulling from that pool.
Exactly. They're totally separate.
Interesting.
And they're billed independently.
Okay.
Which is actually very similar to what you'd see with Azure Synapse Spark.
Oh, I see. So it's like having a separate meter just for your Spark usage.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Like its own thing.
Okay, so just to be clear, this isn't like replacing the old way of doing things, right?
Exactly.
Like the Microsoft Learn stuff said this is working alongside that.
Yeah, it's not an either situation.
Okay.
It's more about giving you options, giving you more flexibility in how you manage your resources and your costs.
I like options.
Right.
And it's interesting because Christian Winther Christensen made a comment on Just's posts, and he basically said, this is giving us a pay-as-you-go option, very similar to what you have with Databricks.
Oh, interesting.
And that's a good thing because it means you don't have to just double your entire Fabric capacity if you need more power for your Spark jobs.
Right.
You can be a lot more granular.
Much more precise, yeah.
Yeah, and Denny Pultz-Gottfredson chimed in too on that thread.
Okay.
And he said that the old way of pricing things, it felt a little bit, on-premise-ish.
Like we were stuck in the past a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
This feels much more modern, much more cloud-like.
Yeah, so this new model is definitely seen as, a more modern, a more cloud-centric approach.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we've got a pretty good handle on what it is now, this pay-as-you-go option for Spark. But let's get into the nuts and bolts.
Right.
How does it actually work, once you flip that switch and enable it? What happens behind the scenes?
So when you turn on Autoscale Billing,
Okay.
and it's important to remember, this is something you choose to do for each Fabric capacity. And it's only available for those Fabric SKUs that are designated with an F, specifically F2 and above.
Okay.
So not the PSQs or those trial capacities.
Gotcha.
So when you enable it, your Spark jobs basically start running in their own little world, their own isolated compute environment.
Okay, so they're not sharing resources anymore.
Exactly. They've got their own dedicated space.
Interesting.
And the blog post and all those configuration details, they really emphasize that you get to set a maximum CU limit.
Okay. So you're in control.
You're in the driver's seat, yeah.
You can say, this is how much I'm willing to spend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really key for managing your costs.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the best part is you only pay for what you actually use.
Okay.
No charges for idle compute resources.
So if it's just sitting there doing nothing, you're not racking up a bill.
Nope, you're only paying for the CUs that your jobs actually consume.
That's pretty efficient.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a much more cost-effective way to handle those Spark workloads.
Now, the main Microsoft Learn article also mentioned that the base cost of Spark, that hasn't changed, right?
That's right. It's still 0.5 CU hour.
Okay, so no hidden price hikes or anything?
No surprises there.
Good, because that would definitely throw a wrench in the plans.
Right.
So let's say you do hit that maximum CU limit that you set up. What happens then? Does everything just grind to a halt?
Not exactly. It depends on what kind of Spark job we're talking about.
Oh, okay, so there's some nuance there.
There is, yeah. As the Microsoft Learn article explains, if you're running interactive Spark jobs.
So like when you're working directly in a lakehouse or previewing data or querying in a notebook?
Exactly. All those hands-on tasks, the system will throttle those jobs a little bit.
Okay, so it slows them down.
Yeah, just enough to stay within that limit.
To keep things running smoothly.
Exactly. But if we're talking about background jobs,
okay,
like those triggered by data pipelines or the job scheduler or through APIs, those will actually get queued up.
So they wait their turn?
Yeah, they'll get processed, but maybe with a bit of a delay if you're hitting that limit.
So it's like the system is smart enough to say, okay, we need to prioritize those interactive tasks.
Right. Got to keep things responsive for the user.
Keep you working, but those background jobs, they can wait a little bit.
Exactly. They'll still get done. And
the article gave an example, something about if you set a limit of 2048 CUs, then your queue can hold up to 2048 jobs.
Right. It's a one-to-one relationship.
Okay. So the higher you set that limit, the more jobs you can have waiting in the wings.
Precisely.
And there's one thing I just want to make super clear because this is important.
Okay.
And the main Microsoft Learn article really hammered this home. Autoscale billing is truly serverless.
It is. It's its own little island.
It's not like dipping into your regular Fabric capacity when it needs more power.
No borrowing allowed.
And it doesn't go back to that pool if it's not using all of its resources.
No, it stays separate.
So it really is its own distinct system.
Completely independent.
All right, so we've talked about the cost efficiency of paying only for what you use.
Right.
And the fact that scaling is independent. So your Spark stuff isn't competing with your other Fabric workloads.
Right. It's online.
What other big advantages are there to using this approach?
So it really boils down to having more control, more flexibility. The Microsoft Learn docs pointed out that it's built for the enterprise. It integrates with Azure quota management. So if your Spark needs you need higher CU limits, you can request those.
There's a process for that.
It's all laid out for you.
Good to know.
And the blog post also highlighted that this gives you dedicated resources just for Spark.
Okay.
Which means no more fighting over resources with other workloads.
Oh, yeah. Resource contention, that can be a huge pain.
It can really bog things down.
And having those dedicated resources, that sounds like a real win for keeping performance consistent.
Exactly. Keeps those Spark jobs running smoothly.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of real-world experiences, the blog post had a quote from Philip Withay over at the London Stock Exchange Group.
Oh, yeah.
And he talked about their experience with the private preview.
Interesting.
What did he have to say?
So Philip explained that before they had Autoscale, they were constantly having to readjust their Fabric capacities. Because different development teams would be running experiments, and they would just eat up all the available resources.
Oh, I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, it was a constant juggling act.
So how did Autoscale change things for them?
He said that for them, Autoscale has been the most impactful Fabric feature.
Wow.
It really changed the game for them.
Big statement.
He said it made cost management so much simpler and more flexible.
Okay.
It meant they could actually share resources more effectively without having to constantly intervene manually.
Right.
And the bottom line was it gave them a huge operational advantage.
So they're saving time. They're saving money.
Absolutely.
And it just makes things run smoother.
Much smoother, yeah.
So hearing about these real-world benefits, it definitely makes it more real.
Right. It's not just theory anymore.
It's like, okay, this is actually making a difference for people.
It's making a big difference.
So let's say someone listening is thinking, okay, this sounds pretty good. How do I set it up?
Right. How do we get started?
What does the configuration and management process look like?
All right. So the setup is actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You do it all through the Microsoft Fabric admin portal.
Okay.
And the documentation configure Autoscale Billing for Spark. It walks you through it step by step. You go to Governance and Insights, then the Admin Portal, then Capacity Settings, and then the Fabric Capacity section.
Right.
You pick the capacity you want to work with. And then in the Autoscale Billing for Fabric Spark area, there's a simple toggle to enable the feature.
Okay, so it's easy to find.
Yeah, it's right there.
And then there's a slider to set your maximum CU limit.
Right. You decide how much you're comfortable with.
So that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's very user-friendly.
But the article did mention a warning about enabling, disabling, or even lowering that maximum CU limit.
Oh, yeah, that's an important one.
What do we need to know about that?
So if you make any of those changes to the settings,
Okay.
it's going to cancel any active Spark jobs that are running under Autoscale Billing. Yeah, it's a safety measure to avoid any billing overlaps.
Okay, so no double charging.
Exactly.
So that's something to definitely keep in mind.
Yeah, plan ahead.
Make those changes when you know there's not going to be any disruption.
Absolutely.
Now, the configuration article also mentions some optional steps you can take in the Azure portal.
Right.
After you've enabled Autoscale Billing, specifically pausing, resuming, and potentially resizing your capacity.
Right.
What's the reason for doing that?
So those steps are really about making sure you're optimizing your costs.
Okay.
Once your Spark workloads have moved over to Autoscale Billing, they're not using your core Fabric capacity anymore.
Right.
So by pausing and resuming your capacity in the Azure portal, you're basically clearing out any leftover Spark usage that might still be hanging around.
So it's like a cleanup.
Exactly, a little bit of housekeeping.
Okay.
And then after that, if your other workloads like Power BI or Data Warehouse, if they don't need as much capacity as you originally had, you might be able to downsize your Fabric SKU.
Oh, interesting.
Which can save you even more money.
Makes sense.
But one thing to remember is resizing SKU. That's something only Azure administrators can do.
Okay, so you might need to get the IT folks involved. So it's all about fine-tuning your overall Fabric capacity.
Yeah.
Once Spark is off doing its own thing with its own billing system.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about monitoring.
Right.
How do you actually keep track of your spending and usage with Autoscale Billing?
So the Microsoft Learn Docs, they outline a couple of ways to do that.
Okay.
In the Azure portal, you can use cost analysis,
Okay.
filter by your specific Fabric capacity, and then look for the meter called Autoscale for Spark capacity usage CU.
All right.
That'll give you all the details on your Spark compute costs.
So that's using the familiar Azure cost monitoring tool.
Right. It's all in one place.
But I remember reading about something directly within Fabric itself, too.
Oh, yeah.
Something in the Capacity Metrics app. Can you tell us more about that?
So the blog post and the Microsoft Learn article about the Metrics app, they highlight a special page just for Autoscale Billing.
Okay.
And this is really useful because it lets you track Spark job usage across all your workspaces.
So it's a centralized view.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You see everything in one spot.
Great.
You can see how usage trends over time.
Okay.
And you can even drill down into specific operations.
Oh, wow.
See how long they took to run, how many resources they used.
So you can really pinpoint what's driving your costs.
Absolutely. You get that granular view.
And the article mentions some different visuals on that page. What kind of information do they show?
So there are three main visuals.
Okay.
First, there's a CU metric ribbon chart,
All right.
which breaks down your capacity usage by the hour.
Okay.
And you can drill down into specific days to see any patterns.
Interesting.
Then there's a CUS usage over time chart,
Okay.
which shows you your billable and non-billable CU consumption every minute.
Wow.
Yep. And there's a dotted line that shows your maximum CU limit.
So you can see if you're getting close to that.
Exact.
And then finally, there's a matrix organized by item in operation.
Yeah.
And that gives you all the detailed metrics for each item in your capacity. So like notebooks, pipelines, things like that.
Exactly. And it tells you if the usage was billable or not.
So that level of detail would be super helpful for understanding your costs.
Right. It really helps you break it all down.
And what happens if you realize you need more than that maximum CU limit you set up?
Well,
Is there a way to increase that?
absolutely.
Okay.
Both Microsoft Learn articles explain how to request additional quotas through the Azure portal. You go to the Azure Quota service, select Microsoft Fabric as the service,
Okay.
choose your subscription, and then you can edit the quota limit for the CUs you need.
Okay.
Once they approve your request, those new limits will apply to your Fabric capacity.
So your Autoscale Billing can handle that extra demand.
Exactly. It can scale up with you.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about what Autoscale Billing is, how it works, the benefits it offers, how to manage it all. So now for someone who's trying to decide,
Right.
should I go with this new Autoscale Billing or stick with the traditional capacity model?
Yeah. How do I choose?
What are the key differences they need to consider?
So the main Microsoft Learn article and the blog post, they both have a really handy table that breaks it all down.
Okay,
It compares the two models side by side.
great.
So in terms of billing,
Okay.
capacity model, that's a fixed cost based on your capacity tier.
Right.
Autoscale billing for Spark, that's Pay as you go just for your Spark jobs.
You pay for what you use.
Exactly.
And then for scaling, capacity is shared across all your workloads in the traditional model.
Right.
But with Autoscale Billing Spark resources, they scale independently.
They're their own separate thing.
And then resource contention, that's a potential issue in the capacity model.
Mm-hmm.
If different workloads all need a lot of power at the same time.
Right. They can step on each other's toes.
But with Autoscale Billing, those dedicated resources for Spark eliminate that problem.
Exactly. No more fighting over resources.
Then finally, the capacity model. It's generally best for those predictable, consistent workloads.
Like those steady Eddie jobs.
Whereas Autoscale Billing, it shines when you've got those dynamic or bursty Spark workloads.
Yeah, where demand is going up and down all the time.
So that table really makes it easy to see the differences.
Right. It lays it all out for you.
And it seems like the smart move would be to use both models strategically.
Absolutely.
So use capacity for those stable, recurring things.
Right.
And then Autoscale Billing for those unpredictable, compute-heavy Spark tasks.
That's the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
You get the cost savings and the performance you need.
So to sum it all up,
Okay.
the big takeaway here is that Autoscale Billing for Spark in Microsoft Fabric.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving you a whole new level of flexibility and the potential to save a lot of money.
Uh-huh.
It's not about replacing the old way completely. It's about giving you a serverless, pay-as-you-go option just for your Spark workloads.
Exactly.
So you get that independent scaling. You only pay for what you use, and you can set limits to keep your costs under control.
Right.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up.
Okay.
How could using both the traditional capacity model and this new Autoscale billing, how could that completely change the way you manage and optimize your data engineering and data science work in Microsoft Fabric?
That's a good question.
Could it unlock new possibilities, make you more agile, more efficient?
It might.
It's definitely worth taking some time to play around with those configuration options.
Yeah,
See how it could work for you in your own environment.
absolutely.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive today.
It's been fun.
It has. Yeah, I've learned a lot.
I have too.
And I hope everyone listening has as well.
Me too.
So until next time, keep on exploring.
Keep on diving deep.
And we'll see you back here for another deep dive soon.
See you then.